Well, joining us for Newsmakers this week are Meredith Burgmann, former President of the New South Wales Legislative Council and a Labor Sydney City Councillor, and Jessica Brown, who's a Research Fellow with the Centre for Independent Studies. And many thanks to both of you for coming in today. Let's start off with the carbon tax and hear some views from the public first as Julia Gillard went walkabout.
Personally, I think it's not going to make any difference to the climate at all, because I think it's just going to be another big tax, and I think a lot of farmers are going to find it's a tax on everything.
I wonder why the energy from your side can't be put into telling us how you're going to reduce emissions. You're talking about the fact that the coal mines will remain open, no one will lose their jobs. We need to know more about renewable energy.
Why did you lie to us?
Right, well, I can talk to you
And
about
why are you continuing to lie and say, well, you know, I didn't really mean to lie?
Well, I can explain all of that to you.
I've listened to you for months. I've watched Parliament.
Yeah.
You're still lying.
Well, there's some public views there. I'll start off with Meredith Burgmann first. I mean, that particular exchange was extremely interesting, not least, I thought, because of the way Julia Gillard kept touching the lady. It was kind of like, I wasn't sure whether it was, OK, stop now, or there. What did you make of, not the tax really, but the response to the tax this week?
From the public?
Yeah.
Oh, look, it's quite clear that at the moment that's playing very badly. I mean, the last poll yesterday showed 27% for Labor and 52% for the Coalition. And the problem is that I think we're facing the first minority government dealing with a difficult issue, and Australians are used to, especially their federal governments, making very powerful and very confident-sounding explanations of their policy. But we're caught, Julia's caught in a situation where it looks like she's forced into situations rather than making a powerful decision, and I think that's really affecting her credibility.
Jessica Brown, what did you think of, firstly, the public response to the tax?
Oh, look, it didn't look very good, and when you see images like that, you know, it's cringeworthy, and it was very uncomfortable seeing Gillard tapping the woman on the shoulder, and it just did seem very uncomfortable. But I think Meredith's right. I think it points to a bigger problem that the government has, which is a real lack of authority. So they're immediately on the back foot, and rather than people taking at face value and saying, look, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt and I'll look into this, they're immediately sort of faced with this distrust from the public. I think because of the way she came into her prime ministership, because of their track record in policy delivery so far. So it's a really sort of tough sell, a real uphill battle for them.
So the baggage is still very much hanging around.
Definitely.
What did you think about the tax itself? Was it the best that could be done in the current circumstances?
No, look, I don't think it was the tax Labor would have done on their own. It's a real compromise position. I don't think I don't think the sky's going to fall in like Tony Abbott does. I think there's a bit of hyperbole going on there. But it's certainly not the best possible policy they can come up with. And I think there's also a bit of fibbing going on behalf of the government, who keeps saying, well, this is a market-based mechanism, it's all about the market. Well, it's not a true market-based mechanism. There's $10 billion of basically industry policy and corporate welfare in there. There's as much direct action as the Coalition's going to have.
But I think that is one of the very good aspects of the new policy. I mean, I too would have preferred the carbon trading proposal that was knocked back by the Greens and the Coalition in the Senate. But the people in the manufacturing industry are getting very, very interested in the $15 billion package, of most of which will go to renewables. And I know the unions and a lot of the workers in the manufacturing industry are suddenly seeing a future for their part of the industry, especially in steel and metal and that part, because of the wind turbines, the thermal.
So all the money that could potentially go to renewables. Did you feel the tax overall was the best that could have been got in the current political climate?
Look, I think politically they had a problem that by bringing in tax reform at the same time as doing compensation for families. It might have been easier just to do it, a straight money amount rather than the tax reform that they've also brought in. But a lot of the aspects of the tax reform I think people will discover in a year's time are terrific, like the 1 million people who will now no longer have to put in a tax return, things like that. So I think in a year's time the situation might be very different. But bringing in tax reform at the same time as compensation packages has been quite difficult.
I actually think that was almost quite a smart move in the sense that it enabled them to make people feel like they were getting more compensation without actually increasing hugely your family tax benefits and other types of payments, which would have had other knock-on problems. So I actually think the tax reform part of it, look, again,
but
it's not...
selling it's hard because it is, everyone finds tax really difficult.
They hate it, don't they?
And they look up the thing in the paper, they look up the sort of tables and they can't find themselves, and so it's very difficult.
Jessica Brown, I wonder what is actually going to be the proof of the implementation of this carbon tax? It's not as if we can say in 5 years' time, oh look, emissions have gone down 0.00009%. So how are we going to say whether it's been successful or not?
I mean, that's the real difficulty with this. We don't know exactly what's going to happen. We don't know what the counterfactual would have been. We don't know who's going to be in government at the time. So this is the real difficulty. I think the only thing that Gillard can hope for is that the tax gets passed and the sky doesn't fall in and people sort of say, oh, well, we'll keep going. It's too difficult to undo now. I think really that's the best outcome they can go for, and I think that's what they're hoping for.
And the problem is that it's like swimming pool fences. It's very hard to prove how many kids didn't die. And with climate change, it's very hard to prove how worse it would have been if the world hadn't moved forward and tried to, put a stop to it. So it's a very difficult one to say we won and we've been successful. But, the science is in, as they say. Even the economists are now saying this is the best package that could have been put forward.
Okay. Did you want to make one more point quickly?
I just think the other problem is the assumptions about other countries moving are pretty heroic. It does assume that other countries, which, like the US, have shown very little sense that they are actually going to move in that direction, is assumed in this package. So how much it's going to make a difference to global temperatures, I'm not sure.
Look, I say someone has to make a start? And I think it's
of course, the whole point of the package was that Australia was not going to meet its emissions targets, whereas other countries, even though they might not have a carbon tax, have been moving in that direction. But we'll leave that one for the moment. The news of the world has been a big problem all week, the hacking scandal, as we know, and it's involving the UK police, a parliamentary inquiry. Let's first hear from the British Prime Minister David Cameron and then the Australian Greens leader Bob Brown.
What has happened at this company is disgraceful. It's got to be addressed at every level, and they should stop thinking about mergers when they've got to sort out the mess they've created.
I wanted to talk about the need for a full inquiry into the media, both ownership and regulation in Australia.
So this has really been a huge issue now that's drawn in the whole world practically. Jessica Brown, first of all, where do you think this is going to finish up, the $1 million question?
Well, we don't know because it's just been unravelling so fast. And so already just in the last day we've seen Rebecca Brooks resign. We've seen Rupert Murdoch making a personal apology to one of the victims' families of the hacking scandal.
And Les Hinton has just resigned this morning too from Dow Jones.
Yeah, so we really don't know where it's going to go. I think there's a lot of people, especially people within the media, who would really like to see the end of Murdoch. And so I think there's a lot of people cheering for the end. But I think he's pretty resilient.
Can I ask you why you think that is?
Well, look, I think there's probably a few different reasons. One, they're the biggest and the meanest. And I've spoken to lots of different journalists who work for non-News Corporation companies, and they all tend to really hate News Corp, so I think there's a bit of cheerleading going on. But I also think, a lot of people have a grudge to bear because they do feel like at some point they've been wronged by the company.
Meredith Burgmann, why do you suggest a lot of people have some sort of a grudge against News Corp?
Look, I keep thinking of the expression, if you live by the sword, you die by the sword. And what we're seeing now is a bit of a feeding frenzy happening. But that's what most politicians and most public figures have experienced from the Murdoch empire in the past, and there is really no love there for Rupert himself. I think he's in real trouble, not just in Britain. I think in America, the FBI are now looking into the 9/11 allegations. There's a law in America about US-based entities not bribing public officials overseas, and
so you think this could be
quite clear they've done that.
And you think it could be very serious if the allegations in the US are proven?
Absolutely. Both Republicans and Democrats have now called for an inquiry. I think he's in trouble there. He's definitely in trouble in Britain. And here in Australia, already, people are talking about his bid for, Australia Network, which is now definitely in trouble.
Right. So where do you suggest it goes from here? And is this something that we need to look at our own media in terms of examining how the media conducts itself?
Look, I think that the Attorney-General was absolutely correct to say, no, we don't want to move towards regulation of the media. What I think is needed is, yet again, a look at the way in which the over-monopolisation of media ownership in Australia, which we've got one of the most monopolised medias in the world. I mean, in Zimbabwe you can go and read 15 daily papers, and in Australia you've got 2 really at most.
OK, well, we'll leave the conversation there, but many thanks for joining us to both of you. Thanks for coming in today.
Thank you.